Designing Worlds is brought to you by Garden of Dreams, offering the finest in natural and fantasy environments.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a very special season of Designing Worlds, the weekly show about design and designers in virtual worlds, brought to you by Prim Perfect Publications. I'm Elric Merlin.
And I'm Saffia Widdershins. And yes, this is a very special season because it marks the 10th anniversary of Designing Worlds.
And we've decided that to celebrate our 10 years, we're having a series of special shows this season, looking back over those 10 years of Second Life and other virtual worlds.
And as well as that, we're going to be looking back over 10 years of Second Life history with the aid of Second Life historian Marianne McCann.
And this week, we're on our 9th show.
Which means that this week, we're looking at the year 2016.
Some of the places we visited in our 2016 show have since disappeared or become inaccessible, but many are, much to our delight, still going strong.
Now, in 2016, we celebrated our 300th show with a visit to a favourite event of ours, the Home and Garden Expo.
I should say we're now up to show 366, by the way, and seeing our 500th anniversary on the distant horizon.
Still some way to go there. Anyway, for our 300th, we visited the Home and Garden Expo, where, as usual, we had a location designed for people to come and relax and enjoy a little conversation.
And in 2016, Eliza Weirwhite of Patron created a really stunning build, complete with an office for Saffia and me.
It was based on her new release of the Banyan House and was utterly sumptuous.
And we followed that up with a visit to the wonderful Culprit, where Saffia unfortunately decided to drive.
You may be wondering why, if we're exploring the Home and Garden Expo, we're sitting at these beautiful and rather palatial desks in our office.
Well, this is not our regular office, unfortunately, but part of the special building that Eliza Weirwhite has created, based on her Banyan House, which forms the Prim Perfect build at this year's Expo.
We saw the Banyan House on the show a few weeks ago, and what Eliza has essentially done is to tear it to pieces and rebuild it as a beautiful office with a gorgeous cafe area and a kitchen where you can prepare your own meal, especially for the Home and Garden Expo. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to leave it.
Well, I was rather thinking the same thing, Saffia. As you can see, I'm surrounded by familiar things like the guitar that I played when we visited the Banyan House originally, and there's a radio which no doubt represents my activities on Radio Real, I suppose. Very, very nice. Let's have a look around, shall we?
I have cats. Lots of cats. I'm happy. Welcome back to Designing Worlds, the show all about design and designers in virtual worlds. And today we're paying the first of 2 visits to the Home and Garden Expo, held in support of Relay for Life of Second Life.
And we're here on Hope 2, a region that's sponsored by Culprit. And we're here with one of the owners of Culprit, Eku Zong.
Welcome to the show, Eku.
Thank you so much.
Eku, you're well known for creating beautiful small homes, and I think we're standing in front of an example here.
Yes, this one actually, I put it out with nefarious purposes.
I see.
One of the first things that Lord Humphrey, or Humps as we like to call him, made for Culprit, and I texted it. And unfortunately, he hasn't for the past few years taken part in Second Life. So in a sort of a bid to get him back, I have brought this to the Expo to show him how brilliant he is, and hopefully we will see a return of Humps, because he's very good at making little things too when he moves his bum.
Ah!
I love the way it's both small and beautifully detailed. Have you seen the ceiling, Elric?
Well, that's actually something I should look at pretty much straight away, actually. But in the meantime, there are other examples of your homes here. Can you tell us about those, Eku?
Yes, if you look towards the back, there's a lighthouse with an orange roof. You can see it through the trees behind us.
Yep.
And this is my take on a New England lighthouse that I saw online and have always, I fell in love with it the minute I saw the picture. And although it isn't a true reproduction of it, it's my take on it, and it's one of my favorite little builds.
And there's a greenhouse as well, I can see.
Yes, I love greenhouses, and that's also one of our earlier works. And the reason why I put newer and older, one of the newer ones is the Lafayette Shotgun House. I'd like to show that Culprit has always been about lots of detail, and we always will be. Because I think that brings a lot of realism and immersion for people if they can have little things that are weathered and used and look like part of their daily life and have been there forever.
Mm. Yes, it gets a bit uncanny valley when everything is too shiny new.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
So which is the Lafayette?
The Lafayette is right behind us. If you see the trees, the little trees behind us, and there's a little New Orleans style shotgun house. That is the Lafayette with the pale greeny blue siding on it. Yes, that's a reproduction of New Orleans shotgun house.
Why were they called shotgun houses? Do you know?
Because straight in out. Yeah, the door in the front and straight through to the back. It was basically a one-room house that people would use.
Oh.
In fact, Saffia, you might remember having seen another one of those in the episode we did at the University of Arkansas.
Yes. I think we did. And that had it was subdivided into semi-rooms. But this is just beautiful. The detailing in it is gorgeous.
Absolutely. In fact, all these little houses here are beautifully detailed and beautifully implemented. Very, very impressive. And I do love the lighthouse, I must say. Mm. But there are some other things that we should look at, I think, as well, aren't there, Saffia?
Yes. Now, it wouldn't be a Culprit build without some fun things to try. And as well as the homes, there's a whole fairground of rides of different kinds.
Yes, we take our fun very seriously at Culprit. If we don't have something squishy or bouncy or roundy, then it's not Second Life for us.
And there's always more to culprit than appears on the surface, so you may think you're going for a simple fairground ride until something happens. So you're pushing it around now.
Yeah, I'm just making sure it actually goes around properly.
Yes, quite. I'm sure Saffia is going to leap on and try something much naughtier. I see that's the default, is hanging on like grim death.
Yeah. There she is, how she fell off.
What's Saffia doing? Whee!
Oh, this is one of my favourites, actually.
The fly, yeah, that's Yuri's favourite one too.
Oh yes, that's neat, isn't it? Absolutely. Nice wave. Very nice.
Really good wave.
Look at Saffia surfing on the aeroplane. That's great. And yes, pushing it. We do actually need to push it at the moment because the sim is getting very creaky.
Yeah. I think one of my favourites is this manual one that's pushing it.
Yes, isn't it? It's great, actually. It really is. And as I say, we need that with the sim in its current state.
Yeah, he has a very quirky sense of humour when it comes to the animation.
Absolutely.
I really like.
That is great.
Surprises me.
Echo, I think Culprit makes all your animations, don't they? They're made by your partner, Your Sousa. And how do I pronounce his name?
Ure. Ure means ghost.
Ure.
Yeah, Ure. And yes, he makes all our animations. He used to have an animation store, and I forced him to close it down and just exclusively make for Culprit, which actually makes building much, much easier, because if you are buying animations, you build something and then you spend 3 weeks looking for animation to fit it, or you tailor your design towards what's available. But in our case, I build something, I pass the model to him, he opens it up in Poser, and he will make or adjust a previous animation that he had to fit the item exactly, which is wonderful.
That's brilliant,
isn't it? Absolutely. So you guys are partners in real life too, I gather, but predating Second Life.
Yes, we met on Yahoo Japan chat, and then we moved in together, and then we got married, and the rest is history.
We did a romance show a couple of weeks ago where we met some couples who'd actually met through Second Life and got married and who are creatives. But you actually came to Second Life last in the order.
That's right. Yeah, we were a bit late to the show compared to some, but I think if we'd met in Second Life, we would have ended up in the same place anyway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, there are lots more rides here, including bumper boats, Elric. I know you love those.
Well, I've certainly had some experiences with them, shall we say, and I must have a go later. Saffia, where are you going?
I've just seen the sweetest little cars, Elric.
Oh, really? Oh dear, you're not going to drive, are you?
It seems the perfect way to get to our next location, Elric.
Eku, thank you. It's been great to have you on the show again, but I think I'd better head out after her before she does herself a mischief, or more likely destroys half the expo.
Take care.
Very cool. See, she can't stay on the road though. Wow! Oh dear, she's going to take out that entire garden over there. No!
I'm on a sim boundary, which is causing me problems crossing it.
You're never one to be short of excuses now, are you?
And
Where's
here I
she off to
go.
now?
Culprits things are always fun. And I'll be taking my zebracorn from Culprit to Fantasy Fair very soon. I'm looking forward to that.
I think we're all looking forward to Fantasy Fair, whether accompanied by a zebracorn or not.
Very true. But another thing I'm excited about is that this year, the Literary Festival region at Fantasy Fair is going to be built by Alessio Ember of Cerridwen's Cauldron, which we paid a visit to in 2016.
It had recently undergone a redevelopment, and the result was, and is, spectacular, as you'll see.
Now, these basalt columns that I can see here, they look slightly familiar. I think I've seen something a bit like this before in real life.
Yes, of course. These columns are inspired directly by the real-life columnar basalt or basaltic columns. You find them either way. They are, in essence, crystals of rock. They form when, under specific circumstances, magma cools without becoming lava, without ever touching the surface. So it cools slowly, and this allows the formation of crystals. The most famous one, the one I drew inspiration from for this, is the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, of course.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yes, and they are... I don't know, I find it... First of all, they're kind of mystifying, because they're very symmetrical, and they fit like if an expert mason had put them together. That's why it's called the Giant's Causeway. They thought a giant had hewn the rock in those forms. And they, because of this symmetry, they are very pleasing aesthetically. So I wanted to bring that into the build.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Absolutely brilliant. Now, one thing that always stands out in your builds is your use of quite remarkable plants, and often fungi, and yet they all have in their context an extraordinary realism.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's a compliment I often get, fortunately, and I'm grateful for that. It's because I am... I'm not only a designer. I have a scientific background, and I am a big fan of all things biological. So I do research plants and fungi before getting to work. I look for specific exotic species, for something that's beautiful, for something that has unusual colors or shapes, and then I research that species, and then I reinterpret it and bring it into my work. So that's what, and people often feel that as an added layer of realism, even though at the beginning, I did specify which species I based the plant on. Lately, I do not, because it's somewhat constraining if I want to do something completely fantastic or that draws, or that draws for several different species. But nevertheless, people do feel this added layer of realism that somewhere in the design, it's based upon something you could find easily. Well, not easily, but I mean, it's not that alien.
Yes.
Something you would find in real life. That's what I mean. As alien as my plants may seem sometimes, as fantastic, they're not so much. We have glowing fungi in the jungles. We have things that look like many of the things I have around. So that's why it feels like it could be real.
Absolutely. Now, we're deep in the heart of the caves here, but I understand there's more to see if we climb upwards. And there's a staircase close by if we splash through a little water.
Yes, of course, there's a lot more to see.
And you really do splash here when you go through the water. I love the way you use sounds, Alicio. You splash through water and you rustle through grass.
Thank you very much. Of course, well, water has to splash, and you have to feel... You have to feel going through the grass. That's my reasoning anyway.
Sounds like a good answer to me. Let's go and find out what lies up those stairs, shall we?
Of course.
This really is a gorgeous area.
Thank you very much, Saffia.
It certainly is, and large enough for a small party.
Indeed, that was the whole idea while doing these. I wanted to create nooks and crannies, but big enough for a group of people to come and hide and chat and have a small party if they want. And this one has quite a view of the caves below and the Temple of Elemental Water at the background. And a nice sampler of several of the mushroom species around this hanging lounge that's maybe not very original, but that's the name of this area, the Hanging Lounge.
One of the things that I adore here is the floor. It has its own beautiful lights, and looked at from a distance, if you pull back and look from the outside, the whole place appears to be a beautiful lantern.
Yes, this is a little reminiscent of Titan's Hollow. I wanted to create precisely for the caves, them being so tall, it was fitting to have something hanging from the high ceiling. And what better to have an area where people can lounge. And with the distance involved, the crystal would really stand out. It was quite an elaborate process too, to create the right material settings for this crystal look. So I am using it as much as possible where I think it will give beauty to the build.
It certainly does.
One of the things I really enjoy here, and that's throughout the entire place, is these remarkably impressive fungi. We don't seem to have enough species of fungi in Second Life, although you're certainly raising the bar, Alessio.
Thank you very much. And I plan to create more, not only from the sculpt species I already have, but bringing more species here. I remember that when I started Cerridwen's Cauldron many years back, when I was still on the mainland, I used to, and I slowly bought land around to increase the size of my shop. I used to tell the group that I was slowly infecting with mushrooms the land.
I love that place. Now, here is another place I loved in 2016, and it comes from Fantasy Faire. It was the fantastic region of Lucentia, with its grand palaces on the ground and cramped hovels in the rooftops. We explored that with Xander Green, one of the organisers of the fair.
And we showed an extract from something that Saffia and Xander organised between them. The first production by the Fairland Players of A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Starring, among others, a certain Mr. Merlin. Let's see it.
So, in fact, how many years have you been involved in the fair? You've been involved, in fact, since the very, very first one, haven't you?
I was one of the co-founders, along with Lauren Thibault and Ember Farina. Originally, Fantasy Faire was a team event, and as we've grown and gotten bigger, we've become one of the official events of the Relay for Life of Second Life season, and just extraordinary now to see it, and it's going into its 8th year, and bigger and more awe-inspiring than ever before.
And this year, you've been involved a great deal with the sound of the fair, I believe.
I have been, and it's something that I've always really enjoyed about Fantasy Faire. Very early on, we introduced the idea of Fantasy Faire Radio, a kind of mythical community licensed public radio station that serves the Fairlands. And what started in a way as a kind of a parody, I suppose, of those things is just evolved to be more or less exactly what it is. The Fairlands are a community. Yeah, it's somehow along the line, it stopped being parody and it just sort of became actually that. And what a great joy to get to bring my longtime love of broadcasting, and worked in public radio for many, many, many years. And to bring that sense of community enthusiasm and community connection through broadcasting to the Fantasy Faire, it's just fantastic. I love it.
It's marvellous fun as well, isn't it?
It is.
if I may ask, what draws you back to the fair each year?
Well, it's a lot of things. The community, the sense of fellowship that I get from working with these people, both those that we've been working with forever. You mentioned this Simweron, beautiful Simweron by Marcus and Sharney of Looking Glass, and they go back to the beginning. with Fantasy Fair the very first year. Lauren Tebow and I were in a mad dash to fill 9 Sims in about a month's time, and Marcus and Charney came just charging in to help, and the next year designed a Sim for us, and that really sort of opened it up. And getting to come back and work with those people over and over again over these years, and each year bring in new people, new talent, new whole new areas of the fair popping up. I love that sense of fellowship, both the old friends and the new. And then there's just the awe that I get the best seat in the house to watch these incredible realms come to be. I see them when they're just flat, empty, sandy, flat, square planes, and then that first week when we have the Sims and the world builders come in and start making these incredible worlds come to life. What a thrill! There's a lot of work that goes into it, but the real payoff is getting to see it all come together and enjoy it in that sense, and see it throughout that whole process. And then, of course, third, it's the fact that it's what it's all about is Relay for Life, and that's something that I am just profoundly honored to continue to be able to be a part of here in Second Life, raise an extraordinary amount of money, $160,000 we've raised in the last 7 years. We'll be starting this fantasy fair with 2 million Lindens, and that's just what we've brought in from the merchants to reserve their stores and various sponsors as well. And that's that alone is an incredible amount of money. 2 million Linden in the Relay for Life kiosk before we've even opened the doors. So just that sense that we can all come together and do this and use this virtual world to do something so powerful in the physical world, in the real world. There's a lot that brings me back here, and mostly it's just the love of the Fairlands for me.
Now, this year there was an innovation when, for the first time, the Fairlands have staged a play.
That's right. We've brought my first love, the live stage, to the Fairlands, and we've had this incredible agenda now. This is our second year of having amazing dance and particle shows, and I love the fact that now we've introduced actual drama theater. We'll be doing A Midsummer Night's Dream, one of my favorite plays by my all-time favorite playwright, and we'll be doing that here on the Fairlands on Saturday, and that's just an incredible thing to get to do here in the Fairlands. And to play Oberon and Theseus is a great joy. I've played Oberon on stage before, and to get to don that mask and step into that extraordinary character, what fun! And to get to do it for a Fairland audience, how much the better. To do A Midsummer Night's Dream for an audience full of actual fairies and, and pixies. It's an amazing thing.
And the odd unicorn, yeah.
Exactly. She's not odd at all.
She's lovely.
Well, in fact, why don't we have a look at a little extract from Midsummer Night's Dream?
Is all our company here?
You were best to call them generally, man by man, according to the script.
Here is the scroll of every man's name, which is thought fit through all Athens to play in our interlude before the Duke and the Duchess on his wedding day at night.
First, good Peter Quince, say what the play treats on. Then read the names of the actors, and so grow to a point.
Mary, our play is the most lamentable comedy and most cruel death of Pyramus and Thisbe.
A very good piece of work, I assure you, and merry. Now, good Peter Quince, call forth your actors by the scroll. Masters, spread yourselves. And that sounded vaguely dirty.
Answer as I call you. Nick Bottom, the Weaver.
Ready. Name what part I am for and proceed.
You, Nick Bottom, are set down for Pyramus.
What is Pyramus? A lover or a tyrant?
A lover that kills himself most gallant for love.
That will ask some tears in the true performing of it. If I do it, let the audience look to their eyes. I will move storms. I will condole in some measure.
Francis Flute, the bellows mender.
Here, Peter Quince.
Flute, you must take Thisbe on you.
Oh, what is Thisbe? A wandering knight?
It is the lady that Pyramus must love.
Oh, nay, faith. Let me not play a woman. I've got a beard coming.
That's all one. You shall play it in a mask, and you may speak as small as you will. Robin Starveling, the tailor.
Here, Peter Quince.
Robin Starveling, you must play Thisby's mother. Tom Snout, the tinker.
Hiya, Peter Quince.
You, Pyramus's father. Myself, Thisby's father. Snug, the joiner. You, the lion's part. And I hope here is a play fitted.
Have you the lion's part written? Pray you, if it be, give it to me, for I am slow of study.
You may do it extempore, for it is nothing but roaring. And here's a marvellous, convenient place for our rehearsal. This green plot shall be our stage, this hawthorn brake our tiring house, and we will do it in action as we will do it before the Duke.
Peter Quince.
What sayest thou, Bully Bottom?
There are things in this comedy of Pyramus and Thisby that will never please. First, Pyramus must draw a sword to kill himself, which the ladies cannot abide. How answer you that?
I liken a parlous Faire.
I believe we must leave the killing out when all is done.
Not a whit. I have a device to make all well. Write me a prologue, and let the prologue seem to say we will do no harm with our swords, and that Pyramus is not killed indeed. And for the more better assurance, tell them that I, Pyramus, am not Pyramus, but Bottom the Weaver. This will put them out of fear.
Well, we will have such a prologue.
Will not the ladies be afeard of the lion?
Roar, roar.
I fear, I promise you.
Masters, you ought to consider with yourselves to bring in, God shield us, a lion among ladies is a most dreadful thing. For there is not a more fearful wild fowl than your lion living, and we ought to look to it.
Therefore, another prologue must tell he is not a lion.
Nay, you must name his name, and half his face must be seen through the lion's neck, and he himself must speak through, saying thus, or to the same defect, ladies.
Oh, lady.
Or fair ladies.
Fair ladies.
I would wish you.
I would wish you.
Or I would request you.
Or I would request you.
Or I would entreat you.
Ow.
Not to fear, not to tremble, my life for yours. If you think I come hither as a lion, it were pity of my life. No, I am no such thing. I am a man, as other men are. And there indeed, let him name his name, and tell them plainly that he is,
Snug.
Snug. The joiner?
The joiner.
Well, it shall be so. Come, sit down, every mother's son, and rehearse your parts. Pyramus, you begin. When you've spoken your speech, enter into that break, and so everyone according to his cue.
Really, it sounds so very, very good, thanks to your hard work, because on top of everything else you did for the fair, you spent a couple of days editing that.
Yeah, and great fun to do it. It's great material, and what a wonderful cast. Great fun to do. We had such a great time recording, and I just think, to be able to use the avatars in a sense as digital puppets, and then bring this essentially radio drama component to it as well, to marry those things in something that's going to be just very visually delightful to look at, and a lot of fun to listen to. Shakespeare definitely knows what he's doing, and you're always in good hands, when you sit down and prepare to embark on a journey that he's piloting, and that's what we've done here yet again, labored in his light, and how wonderful and moving even to do it on the 400th anniversary of his passing. So a very special day for a lot of reasons that will be.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us, Xander. And I must say, before we go, that what a pleasure and honour it is to work with you on the radio station. And it's, I think, the third year we've done this, is it?
It is indeed, and this is another thing that I'm profoundly grateful for, is the relationship that Fantasy Fair Radio enjoys with Radio Reel, and with you and Gabby Reel, and what you guys bring to Fantasy Fair Radio. It wouldn't be on the air without you. Literally, and I think the Fairwaves are very much blessed to have you and Saffia, Gabby, and Ash Sinclair, so many people who make Fantasy Fair Radio possible, for whom I just have great appreciation.
Yeah, me too, actually, and it's listening to it, it's It's interesting how much of our voices are on there. Oh well.
Yeah, but every year it's a little less. Every year we manage to bring in just one more person.
Yeah, exactly.
Take that much more off of us. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now let's take a look at some of the amazing places here at Fantasy Faire. And I believe that Midsummer Night's Dream will be making a reappearance this year, Saffia.
We'll have performances of both Midsummer Night's Dream and our popular performance from last year, Much Ado About Nothing. But there will be one significant change to the performance of the Dream, and I promise people will adore it.
I think we'll have to wait and find out what that is. But now we're going to take a short break.
There's lots more to see and hear about those, so
don't go away.
Radio Real is an internet public radio station with multiple streams on the air daily. We play an extensive variety of music for listeners with eclectic taste, from early music to Victoriana, big band and folk, plus drama and special programs. For more details, visit radioreal.org.
The best things in life are free.
Designing Worlds is brought to you by Dutchie. Live your dreams.
Welcome back to Designing Worlds, the show all about design and designers in virtual worlds. And today, as part of our 10th anniversary season, we're looking back over the 9th year of Designing Worlds, 2016.
And we're going to find out a little more about what was going on in Second Life in 2016 by talking to our resident historian for this season, Marianne McCann. And in advance, I really do apologise for the sound quality. Mari and I hit huge technical problems on the day we recorded the interview. Hello everyone, and welcome to the next instalment of my talks with Mari McCann, our resident Second Life historian on Designing Worlds this season. And we're now coming up to very recent history because we're going to be looking at 2016. Mari, it gets a bit harder, doesn't it, as we come up to the present?
Oh, absolutely. It's harder to kind of find that, what's going to be important in 5 years and figure that out.
Yeah, looking back, we could look back at something like 2010 and we could see at once things like the change of personnel at the labs. That was all going to be important. It's harder when it's only a year ago.
Absolutely.
But we'll do our best. Because 2016, would you say I'd be correct in saying that it was the year of bento?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we saw it in beta the previous year, and the buzz was there. And 2016 is when it went live on the main grid. And I mean, as you know, before it allowed for more expressive avatars, better facial expressions and hand movement, and it also added more bones for things like wings and tails and so on. And as a side note also, shortly after Bento went live, I recall the first Bento-enabled head, which Katwa had made, hit the market. It was kind of a beta release just shortly after. And it became very popular in a lot of fashionista circles right off the bat. And the thing that was funny about it was not everybody out there was yet running a Bento-enabled viewer. It hadn't made it into Firestorm yet. It was still only in the official, and so a lot of people were running around with this head, and people were seeing these avatars that had no face. All they were was a brain floating there with these eyeballs that were melting off their faces. It was extremely surreal. It was sort of reminiscent of when Mesh first hit, and everyone was running around wearing toruses and cut cubes.
Yeah, the Katwa heads really took off in a big way, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely, and they've remained still very, very popular. I think a large portion of it, people got them right then, fairly early, fell in love with it, fell in love with the way it worked, and have stuck with it.
I remember when we were filming The Black and Mirror, which was back in 2012, we were saying how much we longed to be able to lift one's sardonic eyebrow. So the coming of Bento was just incredible because it gives so many more possibilities and things like expressions and so on.
Yeah, what you saw also is that everyone had started to buy their mesh bodies in the previous years, and all of a sudden everyone had to kind of do it all over again because now everyone wanted to have those bodies with hands that were movable fingers and movable faces and so forth. So you really saw that kind of regrowth in avatar bodies.
I'm just about to change over to bento hands, so I'm looking forward to starting to experiment with that. What have you got bento at this point, Mari? Have you moved to a bento head or hands, or?
Well, today, well, at least not in this avatar that I'm wearing now, because of course I'm in my 2016 pre-bento Tweeny-Doo body. But at current, yes, I do use either a pair of Vista bento hands or the Twinster body, which we'll see in the 2017, which is bento enabled, and absolutely love it. I haven't yet moved to the head. I haven't found one that's quite right because I want to keep kind of the same look about me.
I was the same way. I tried with the Catois and I tried a couple of other heads, and neither of them looked completely Saffia. For one thing, they all seem to have much larger lips than me. I don't have particularly plumped up lips. I've always avoided the collagen. But I finally found one, and I agree, once you get it, you love it. To me, though, one of the problems with adding all this bento stuff to yourself is that it all comes with HUDs. And you suddenly become, if you want to run it so that you can have different expressions appearing on your face at different times, you suddenly become incredibly script heavy.
Exactly. Anytime with the body that I use, you have, this all-in-one HUD, and I can't keep it on me when I'm doing things just because it's so much texture and script, and it's just, no, this has to go so I can actually focus on the world in front of me. Yeah. And having all the different bits, so if you have your hands from one person and your head from another and your body from another, you end up with very little screen space because you've got HUDs everywhere. Exactly. The price of vanity. Indeed. Well, we all pay it. Certainly, in past years you had face lights, or you had, any number of things that have been done to try to improve the avatar's vanity. And I think you always will. Yeah. And before we leave the topic of bento, I'd like to talk to you about those two cute dogs that you have here. Are they actually bento dogs? They aren't. Unfortunately, they're scripted the same way we saw previous years, where it flips between different states to show the approximation of movement. Although by this point, the scripting's gotten a lot better. And one of the things that's really neat about this one, which is from GN, which has really begun to focus heavily on animals at this point, is that they can wander around and, make a mess of things and dig at the set. And they're really quite whimsical and fun. See these come up more and more at this point. And I think that what you're going to see as we move on into 2018, we'll see Avamet, which will take that into the next level. And we'll talk about that a bit soon. So, Linden Lab had several projects going this year. One quite large one, I think. Yeah, the lab, through their Linden Department of Public Works moles, they opened their first kind of land project in many years, which was called Horizons. And it's essentially a combination of the things that worked with the Linden homes and also with city areas like Bay City and Nautilus City. Those have double prim land, and they've got a consistent theming that the moles have created. And then combined with the off-parcel home system that they created for the Linden homes, so that whatever house you selected from their menu wouldn't count against the land impact of your parcel. So you got an additional chunk of land or premiums that you could use. And they really worked. Yeah, and they really worked to to try to create a theme with this sort of almost retro-futuristic feel to it, and tried to encourage community groups. But it seems to have faced the same issues as Bay City and Nautilus City, where land speculators came in and purchased the majority of the parcels and are now raising the prices on those parcels to what could be unrealistic prices. I do hope, though, that it'll eventually sort itself out over time, much like it has in other places.
I hope so, too. It reminds me of someone who was around pretty much in the early days, 2007, 2008, an avatar called Enna Hacks, who built a whole city, region, suburbs called Ennaville, which very much had that 1950s futuristic vibe, which was very cool. She wrote a very popular blog at the time called I Live in SL, and she was originally Second Life, but it then became I Live in Scienceland. She did work in Kitely and in Worlds, but I think she's kind of given up virtual worlds now. But she did some interesting stuff. I think we had her on a couple of early shows as well. But there's one other thing I wanted to say about Horizons, the environment, and that's interesting about it, and it's the first time that the lab have constructed something that is adult, that's aimed at adult avatars. Yeah, I think there was a bit of a move for the lab to do that. Now, they had done a little bit before with when they initially put out Zendra, put an area which had a lot of the concepts that you saw in the other city regions. But because of the way they handled the move to Zendra, that never really fully gelled in the same way as the other city areas. So this really, is kind of the first time the lab's really seriously taken on the city notion in an adult area. Now, there was another thing about Horizons too that I think we ought to talk about. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that also makes Horizons a bit different compared to these others is that they put an experience game actually in the midst of the residential land, which, allowed them to use some of the gaming tools that they've added over the last few years. And really, they made a fairly impressive game out of it. One that maybe more people should check out at some point. It's got some really interesting levels and so forth. And actually, on the set, I've got a couple of the minor prizes from it, the lower level prizes. There's some better ones, but to be honest, I've yet to make it through the final levels of this game myself. Yeah, we went over and played it when it first opened, and some of it is really exciting, and we got boosts to some of the higher levels because there was no way I was going to make it. I was just absolutely hopeless. And there was one level in particular, I don't know if they've changed it now, but it only actually worked if you were using a Second Life viewer. And I can see that awful lot of people off because Firestorm is so ubiquitous. Now, there are a couple of other things away from Horizons that the lab did this year. One of the things that was very huge for a lot of people, certainly for myself, it was probably my favorite thing from this year, was that they increased the land impact allotments across the grid, starting with the Linden Homes and Mainland and then eventually estate regions. So everybody got a chunk more of land impact. They could put more items out and this sort of thing. And I think this was really huge. I recall that, in fact, that you did a special edition Designing Worlds on it. Yeah, we were that excited about it. And I ran around kind of throwing new furniture all over my Linden home just to demonstrate what I suddenly could do. I mean, the combination.
Yeah.
It had actually been beautifully furnished by Colleen Desmoulins when I got it. And so I used her stuff from the loft to upgrade it, but the combination of suddenly putting in mesh furniture, which, you know, has much less land impact, but this enormous boost to what I could do, it was a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely. And for those of us in the city regions like Bay City, that land's already double prim, so all of a sudden we were just swimming in land impact. I had in the sky a work platform that was essentially 3Li, just a couple of quick box prims, and all of a sudden I'm putting up these huge islands and bridges and so forth, because all of a sudden I could. Yeah. It was like, this is something I can finally, hundreds of prims available to me right now.
I know. There are three of us who live on our full region, with Aisling Sinclair, Vic Mornington, and me. And Ash said, do you want to go up? You know, we've gone up to 20,000 now. Do you want to go to the 30? And we were like, yeah. Why would we not?
Exactly.
Yes, and very happy. Yeah, I've got complete theatre sets up there now.
I know exactly how that works. But even with that, there were some losses. We saw Mount St. Michael went under, which was a recreation of the First Life island. Also, the in silico silent science fiction regions went under. Those were rescued kind of at the 11th hour by an anonymous funder. Right. I believe Mount St. Michael was also rescued.
Yes, and that was a Linden Lab thing. I think 2016 was the year that they actually saved several things. The Gardens of Apollo were brought back.
Yeah.
And Mont Saint-Michel was saved and is still there.
Similar to how they brought back Sfarga and the Galaxy prior.
Yeah. In Silico was a private buyer. I think it went through a few problems and hiccups, but I went over to look at it the other week, and it's pretty much as I remember it. I mean, you know, perhaps doyens of in silico who spent most of their lives there, their second lives there, would say things have changed or gone or moved around a bit. But to me, it looked very similar to when I was over there filming a show.
Well, there was another one of the changes for land in 2016 is that the lab offered for a limited time what they called a buy down, where you could put an upfront cost and they would reduce the fee for your island or your homestead, which could lead to some long-term savings. I know that Minnie took advantage. One of the islands I'm involved with jumped in on that. And it probably also gave the lab a fairly significant boost in funds for work that they were doing at the time.
It was, again, my little island took advantage of that as well, because three of us reckon we're in for the long haul. It was worth contributing to that cost and then, reducing our rent long term.
Yeah, and that was certainly where I am. We looked at that as well. We've been here for several years. Why not continue? You know, keep that going. And we also saw, perhaps as a result of that, perhaps other things, a lot of new projects started to come into the grid. One of the ones I was really fond of this year was the Vordoon Gallery, which is kind of a virtual take on a First Life art gallery with a fairly impressive real-world style build, some nice use of experience tools to kind of provide that galaxy, that gallery experience. And it opened with this really wonderful Titanic experience that, I mean, kind of what I have seen in like real world museum experiences and overall scope. I included in our display this time the opening poster,
right,
and a picture from their gift shop setting up, because any good gallery has a gift shop, and also a painting by Celeste Frausi that was featured in the opening round of those lips.
They are. It does look very spectacular and well worth a visit. Now, there are other events, regular events coming up during...
Well, of course.
Perhaps you could tell me about one that we have several posters for.
Indeed. Well, we've talked about just about every year. The SL is kind of the big event of the year, and this was once again the community celebration. It came together, and it one of the pieces that was just gorgeous at this one, and I hope that we'll have some pictures, was the giant automaton that Walton Wainwright had made. He's the owner of Contraption in Second Life, and he made this just astounding giant figure that was towering over the stage, and he would move, and it was just unbelievable. This was the second time he'd shown at the birthday, and he's since, hey, maybe we'll see him at the next, who knows, but that would be telling now, wouldn't it?
Well, I certainly think we hope he'll be back, because yes, he's showing with the automaton. I mean, the crashed train station, which was his SL12B, I think, with the entrance area.
Yes, the welcome area.
It was a little surprising as a welcome area, but it was terribly well done. And then, of course, the automaton was just phenomenal. I'm sure we'll talk a bit about what he did last year in 2017, because that was jaw-dropping as well.
Absolutely. I mean, his work is always just so stellar. One of the other things that was interesting as far as the birthday was that I think we almost, it's sort of a sine wave of sorts, where the lab's involvement with the birthday ebbs and flows, and we obviously talked about 9B, where Linden Lab had all but pulled away from the birthday event. And in 2016, we saw them kind of stepping back in a bit. They organized this music festival as part of the birthday, and they used one of the birthday stages to host this event where they brought in Second Life live performers to do this whole concert venue series, almost like a Coachella or something in Second Life, which was really kind of a different step for the lab to kind of step in on that after so many years of hesitancy around the birthday.
It was great. I mean, it was such a fantastic thing to have. And by now, of course, the talks with the Lindens were well underway and very popular. Then that was people, when I started those, it was an opportunity for people to meet the Lindens and ask them questions, but also see that they were really regular people doing rather interesting jobs.
Exactly.
So that was a good thing. It was a great birthday. Now,
yeah, absolutely.
We have at the back of the stage a rather intriguing poster.
Indeed. Well, it's something that you can't talk about 2016, I suppose, without acknowledging. This was a year that First Life kind of invaded Second Life. The 2016 U.S. presidential election, which it led to some, almost griefer-like issues around the grid with supporters of Trump and other people that were just trolling in his name. kind of wreaking havoc on some of the other campaign headquarters in Second Life, which we'd seen other campaign headquarters, usually fan created, for years, but it really kind of exploded at this point. I don't want to delve kind of into the politics per se, but it has to be acknowledged that this was a thing that happened. And yes, the sign in the background was actually from a counter protest, that there was a Clinton campaign headquarter in Bay City in Second Life, and there were Trump fans and or provocateurs who would stand out in front of it with big signs to mock the Clinton people. And then you ended up with this sign as a mocking further of the Trump people that was used, at the same location. So it was really kind of a weird, messy time. So yes, it's a parody of the Trump slogan and so forth.
And it's gone on being a weird, messy time ever since, really.
Oh my, yes. Not delving too far into that.
Let's not disappear down the rabbit hole of real life. Let's keep on with Second Life. Because there's something else here that's really rather cute. Some dolls. Yeah,
these are a couple of items that were introduced from a store called Garbaggio, which primarily does shoes, heels and so forth. But they introduced in a gotcha machine these fashion dolls, which are Barbie-like, but they're based on celebrities. And they've become this very popular niche item. Every 3 months or so, they bring out a new series of dolls that represent different, whether it's pop culture figures or characters from movies or whatever. And they've become these really popular, highly sought after items. So I wanted to acknowledge that was 2016 where that started.
Well, quite a lot of things started in 2016 and makes it a fascinating year. And I would say on the whole,
Absolutely.
A very positive year. One thing we haven't discussed was controversies at SL13B, and I may be wrong, but I don't think there were any major controversies at SL13B.
There really weren't. It was rather odd, especially for, the stigma that one applied 13. It was remarkably calm overall.
Perhaps everyone was holding their breath so much that it passed off without incident.
Perhaps. I hope so. And may it continue to.
Indeed. Well, we'll be finding out what happened in 2017 next week. Murray, this has been great, as usual, to catch up with you. And we've covered quite a few things happening this year. Thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
And we'll be back next week for our last look in these 10th birthday celebrations, when we'll be looking at 2017. So see you then. Even with bad sound, I think you'll agree that this was another fascinating conversation.
It was, although I do see your point. It's harder to assess history as it gets closer to your present time.
Yes, indeed, although our next clip comes from a show where we have a very comfortable difference in time. We visited Rocca Sorrentino, a fascinating region whose setting is late 18th century Naples, the time of Sir William Hamilton and his wife Lady Hamilton, with Sir William serving as ambassador to the court of Naples.
It was the time when the Grand Tour of Europe was immensely popular, and Naples, with its recently discovered Roman ruins, was the frequent destination.
And it was visited not only by young men seeking to round off their education, but many of the doyens of society too, such as Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, and her sister, Lady Bessborough, and of course, Lord Nelson.
Of course. Rocca Sorrentino captures this beautiful era, so let's see for ourselves.
Welcome back to Designing Worlds, the show all about design and designers in virtual worlds. And today we're exploring Rocca Sorrentino with Sarah Timeless and Aldo Stern. And we've come to what would have been a very important element in the life of the inhabitants of Rocca Sorrentino, the church.
Shall we go inside?
Let's.
After you, please.
These black and white columns are very striking. They remind me of Siena Cathedral. Was this inspired by a particular church?
Well, you're right. It is similar with the alternating bands of black and white marble to Siena, although the columns are simpler here. This is closer to the Church of St. John the Baptist in Monte Rosa, which is just to the south of Genoa. And it's sort of that Ligurian Gothic. And again, it's reflective of different people coming here, because people from that part of Italy, the Genoese, came here to do trading and establish trading colonies in the 13th, 14th century. And this part of the church represents something that probably would have been built in the 14th century. But then you'll notice, when you looked at the facade, did you notice it had been modernized and had a nice Baroque facade on the front that is actually drawn from a number of there's a number of different churches that are very similar to that design that you see on the outside. But this, like I say, the closest thing is St. John the Baptist in Monte Rosa.
Right. You can also see the Baroque style in the marble that's lining the lower wall, I think.
Yeah, it's been, and then the campanile was probably added at a different time, because it and might even have been from an earlier structure.
Right.
Now from here, I gather we can actually descend to explore the city, is that right?
Yes, of course. We can go right down and see the sights in town.
Now, I believe this is a rather interesting place.
Well, this is our artist studio, Un Piccolo Studio. And in addition to having small examples of local residents' art, we've outfitted it to look exactly like an artist studio would have looked like during the time period. You can actually come in here and sit for a portrait, take a picture of yourself in a classical pose with Mount Vesuvius in the background.
Oh, how wonderful. What a clever idea. So then you've got your genuine 18th century portrait.
Yes, and so many British travelers did have their portraits done when they got to Italy. There was a cottage industry of artists who specialized in this kind of thing for the tourists.
That's wonderful.
Well, let's continue down, shall we?
Lead on.
I think Aldo had better lead on. I think
Yes,
I'd
I
probably
think
get
so.
hopelessly lost.
Well, that's half the fun is exploring.
Yeah, right, isn't it?
Not
And
when it's
actually,
midnight
we
and you're
haven't
tired.
even taken you to the really interesting exploring places. That's next time.
Okay. The shops along here seem very authentic.
We've tried to make sure that our town has very authentic shops, as you've noticed. And here we have a musical instrument seller selling authentic 18th century instruments. And next door we have the sword cutlers. Elric might want to stop in there because a gentleman of the period would not have been fully dressed without wearing his sword. And I notice Elric might be missing his over there.
Indeed.
Part of the authenticity comes from the resource material that we draw on. The shops, for example, they're great illustrations in Diderot's encyclopedia of things like dress shops and sword cutler and printing shops, and that's where we got the information about what would be in them and how to arrange the pieces.
Yeah, we're going to have to come back.
Yes, aren't we just? Absolutely.
If you'll have us.
Of course we'll have you. After this one, we'll be experienced veterans.
Now this must be the library. What used to
The
be called
academia.
What used to be called a circulating library, I gather. Perhaps you can tell us about that.
You can. It would have been fairly unusual to have a real circulating library in this period in Italy, but because we're an enlightened group here, we have made a collection of 18th century books, plays, autobiography, travel journals, and so on, which are on the shelves of the library down here.
This is also where we have our book discussions, and the book discussion that's coming up for this summer is going to be Dangerous Liaisons.
Ah, yes.
Hey.
It certainly seems to be arranged for events.
And I gather upstairs is rather fascinating too.
Ah, yes, the Cabinet of Curiosities. Why don't you follow me on up?
Aha, I see. I think we should.
The cabinets of curiosity, cabinet meaning room, could be just a case, or it could be an entire room. You mentioned the Ashmolean as an example. They're the precursor of the modern museum, but they kind of just reflect the interests of the people who put them together. So here is sort of every area of interest, kind of trendy interests like astronomy and archaeology and natural history and history of the locale and art, and all sort of organized by categories, but also a very eclectic approach. And it's interesting because the way we put this together was sort of the way they put together a society's cabinet in those days. It was a community project. People came and said, "Hey, I love this guy's paintings. Let's put some I'm fascinated by birds. Let's put stuffed birds in. And the other thing is that everything in here, if you touch it, you'll get a note card that is perhaps sort of interpretive, but from an 18th century perspective. And as much as possible using 18th century source material to discuss, sometimes in very tangential ways, the material.
Now, we do have more extracts to show you.
But before we do that, to see some of the other elements of Second Life in 2016, we asked our esteemed photographer Wildstar Beaumont to dig into his archives once again.
So, let's see what he found.
Welcome back to Designing Worlds, the show all about design and designers in virtual worlds. And today, as part of our 10th anniversary season, we're looking back over the 9th year of Designing Worlds, 2016.
Every year we try to find some special places to visit for Halloween, and 2016 was no exception. We actually found 3 this year, all fascinating in different ways.
Let's take a look at one of those, Ironwood. Welcome back to Designing Worlds, the show all about design and designers in virtual worlds. And today we're exploring some of the amazing places that have been created for Halloween in Second Life, or have been decorated accordingly.
And our final location is actually not a Halloween special, because it is in fact here all the year round. Although a few additions have been made for Halloween, we'll let you work out which.
We've come to the Ironwood Hills, a region created by Jester Knight and Cyrus Knight. They said they like the regions to speak for them, so this time we'll be exploring on our own.
However, I did talk with Jester earlier in the week, and he gave me a little background to the region.
Oh, excellent. So tell us a little bit about it.
Well, this is what it says in the destination guide. Ironwood Hills is a post-apocalyptic sim, ravaged by time and nature. As sirens wail in the distance, derelict buildings give up ghosts of their past. You'll find an abandoned amusement arcade under a plume of stale popcorn. The threat of dangers and other darker things lurking around every bend in the path towards the corpse-filled caves. An eerily beautiful landscape that tries hard to hide its secret.
Well, nice. That sounds very promising. Shall we go and discover some of these secrets then?
Let's.
This looks rather alarming.
Nevertheless, it's our way forward. We need to be swallowed up by the region.
Well, I really hope you know what you're doing, Saffia. Well, that was definitely rather chilling.
And a very effective entrance to this part of the experience, I think.
Yes, I've seen a few ghostly fairgrounds in Second Life, but this is very spectacular. I don't think I'll risk a ride on that Ferris wheel, though.
No, better not.
So, can you tell us anything more about this?
Well, Jester and Cyrus originally built Ironwood Hills as a homestead home just for themselves, but they're both photographers and thought people might like to take pictures here too. Eventually, the region became more public, and they actually have a tiny 6-prim skybox to themselves.
I see.
Their inspirations here are taken from different horror movies and their own imaginations. Silent Hill was a big inspiration in the beginning, which they say you can tell when the sirens go off. And they do nods to various cultural references now and then too. You'll find there's a Stranger Things inspired house, a Children of the Corn reference, and all that sort of thing.
Fascinating. I see there's an asylum tucked away behind the fair.
Yes, and one of the most terrifying things about it I found was it plays the most incongruously jolly music, inspired, I believe, by the TV show American Horror Story. It's very chilling.
I have to say, like the other places we've visited today, the soundscape is very impressive.
Yes, people really seem to have caught on to the fact that you can use 2 senses in Second Life to create an atmosphere. For a long time, people have been very reliant on the visual, with a few creators like Lauren Tone and Hasta Peterson really pushing the importance of soundscapes.
And now it's definitely been taken on board. So, where are we going now, Saffia?
We're going to climb the hill and pass through some wonderfully spooky settings.
Lead on. The region itself is always being built. Jester and Cyrus like to keep it a living and breathing project, and so change it up at times to keep it fresh and give people more places to explore and take photographs. That's a big reason why they keep the region with res enabled. They encourage people to take pictures, and they've had a lot of people do machinima here. I have to say, if we ever made season 3 of The Black and Mirror, I'd certainly be looking at this as a location. I can see why. And you said this is a permanent installation?
Yes, it is. They've actually been open for over a year, and they say they are year-round creepy. They find they do get popular around Halloween, but they're not really a Halloween region, although they add some Halloween features like zombies to help with people's photography at this time of year. It's a labour of love for both Jester and Cyrus, and they love the community they've helped to create here. And here's the Children of the Corn section. Having chilled ourselves thoroughly, we decided to get ourselves, well, me, killed in a variety of unspeakable ways.
In other words, we visited Horizons, the new Linden Lab area with residential districts and also an amazing game.
We were able, thanks to Wildstar, to cruise around the Horizons regions before they opened to the general public, when it was all shiny and new.
Let's see some of it now. Take it away, Wildstar.
This really is an excellent way to see the waterways.
Yes, it is. This is actually part of the design. We wanted people to be able to explore through all these regions by water and by the roads.
The residential buildings too, they look very striking arranged together.
Yes, it's nice because it ties everything in. It just adds to the feel of, this is a community.
Now, I think I can see something interesting on one of the islands, towering above the homes.
There's a reason for that. In the center of every one of the Horizons regions, we put a little park area. And one of the reasons that we did that was because if you just type in a name of any region and teleport to it, it takes you to the exact center of the region. And to avoid that being a resident's home, we made it so that was like a little park, a little build. Some of them are statues, some of them are just interesting little side things, and there's a weather rock and other sort of things, just for some interest in a little community area in every single region.
That's very cool. I've seen robot statues, but what is a weather rock?
If you've ever seen one of those, it's sort of just a kitschy little. It's more of a joke, really. It's a rock, and it has a sign that says, if rock is wet, it's raining. If rock is white, it's snowing.
Right.
If rock is gone, tornado. That kind of a thing. Yeah.
Okay. course, after all this, we ended the year in New Babbage, this time with illustrated stories and a rather special song.
And we'll let the writer of that song, McKnight Cul-de-sac, tell you all about it.
Greetings and Merry Christmas. McKnight Cul-de-sac here. Today, I would like to share another Christmas song unique to the city-state of New Babbage. This one a bit less depressing than the song I shared last year. Everyone in New Babbage knows about Steam Santa, how he flies through the air in his steam-powered sleigh every Christmas Eve, delivering gifts to the citizens of New Babbage. They also know Steam Santa's assistant and chief engineer, the Boiler Elf. The Boiler Elf is not an especially cheerful or friendly creature, but he has an important skill. He knows when someone is telling the truth and when they are not. When Steam Santa asks you if you have been good, Boiler Elf listens, and he will determine, using his special truth sense, whether you deserve a Christmas gift or not. This song could be the story of many residents of New Babbage, young and old, who know what gifts they want Steam Santa to bring them on Christmas Eve, but they aren't quite sure of passing the Boiler Elf's test of worthiness. The song is called Boiler Elf, Don't Stare at Me.
Steam Santa says ho, ho, ho. Boiler Elf just growls. Boiler Elf, don't stare at me. Boiler Elf, don't glare at me. Boiler Elf, don't stare at me from underneath the Christmas tree. Boiler Elf, don't glare at me. You know that I've been good. Tell Steam Santa I can't exist without what's on my Christmas list. Boiler Elf, don't glare at me. I know that I've been good. When you talk to Steam Santa, Boiler Elf will hear you too. If you tell a lie, Boiler Elf will frown at you. Boiler Elf tells Steam Santa who to put onto his list. If the Boiler Elf likes you, you will get a Christmas gift. Boiler Elf, don't stare at me from underneath the Christmas tree. Boiler Elf, don't glare at me. I'm sure that I've been good. Tell Steam Santa I can't exist without what's on my Christmas list. Boiler Elf, don't glare at me. I really have been good. When Steam Santa comes on his sleigh that runs on steam, Boiler Elf is chief of his engineering team. Through the air they fly, round the chimney stacks they weave. Over all New Babbage, bringing gifts on Christmas Eve. Boiler Elf, don't stare at me from underneath the Christmas tree. Boiler Elf, don't glare at me. I promise I've been good. Tell Steam Santa I can't exist without what's on my Christmas list. Boiler Elf, don't glare at me. I'm sure that I've been good. Steam Santa says ho, ho, ho. Boiler Elf just growls. Boiler Elf, don't stare at me. Boiler Elf, don't glare at me. Steam Santa says stare at me. Boiler Elf, don't glare at me. Boiler Elf, don't stare at me from underneath the Christmas tree. Boiler Elf, don't glare at me. I hope that I've been good. Tell Steam Santa I can't exist without what's on my Christmas list. Boiler Elf, don't glare at me. I try so hard to be good. Steam Santa, don't stare at me. Boiler Elf, don't glare at me.
coming to the end of our show on 2016 now, and next week will be our last, 2017.
Now, don't forget that if you want to see this program again, you'll be able to catch it on the Designing Worlds channels at aview.tv and slartist.com, and on the Designing Worlds and Prim Perfect blogs.
As we mentioned earlier, some of the places we visited back in 2016 have gone now, but you'll find details on our blog of other places that we visited that are still with us. And next week, we'll be exploring 2017 in our final show of the season.
But for now, we'll leave you and wish you fair winds and clear waters.
Fair winds and clear waters.